Welcome to the Authentic Dentist Podcast. Join Dr. Allison House of House Dental in Scottsdale and Shawn Zayas, founder of Zana, as they lead dentists deeper along the journey of authenticity to reach greater fulfillment in their professional lives and to deliver remarkable patient experiences.
Okay, so crazy week. It's just one of those things where it's like the news hits and someone got murdered, but not just any person. CEO of UnitedHealthcare. And I was not expecting, to me, it wasn't anything that was that strange until we started talking. And you're like, oh, I guess I completely missed the little subculture that you've been seeing.
I guess I live in a different world than most people. So UnitedHealthcare's CEO, his name is Brian Thompson, I think. Anyway, he was murdered. He was shot by somebody on December 4th, which was just a couple days ago. And it's a horrible tragedy. I mean, it's awful. And it was all over the news. But the comments by doctors have been dark, really dark. And I found it interesting because as doctors, we're supposed to be compassionate, and I think we are. But when you hear the frustration that we're dealing with insurance, like I can't muster any sympathy either. There's no part of me that can muster any sympathy, which is tragic, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not in a situation like this where you normally hear about someone tragically getting shot down in the street, and yet you and a whole bunch of other people that kind of feel almost the same exact way.
We all feel the same way. I mean, they actually had to shut down a Reddit, is it a blog? A whole thing on Reddit where everybody made a lot of comments that were very dark. Things like, there's no condolences whatsoever. It's things like sending my copays and deductibles, that you denied services for gunshot wound because it's considered cosmetic. I mean, just really dark comments about how UnitedHealthcare has treated physicians and doctors and dentists over the years.
I mean, you shared a statistic, something about 60-something million claims were denied that led to people dying from UnitedHealthcare.
There's no question that UnitedHealthcare's denials of claims, not in dentistry, of course, but in medical, have led to the deaths of many, many people. I think the statistic was like 60 million. I can't say that's for sure. I do know that they implemented an AI system about a year ago where a third of claims are completely denied. That's insane. If you think about how many claims come in, I mean, that's more than 60 million probably.
Okay, so there's a lot of just general sentiment of like, oh my gosh, I can't stand insurance companies. And, there's rhetoric, there's just conversations around that. But is this the first time that you've heard of a CEO being murdered?
I mean, this is the first time I've ever heard of something like that. And I think it's interesting because the sentiment is so different than it was even when I started practicing. I mean, doctors have always been at odds with insurance companies, and I think that's typical and normal. We have different value systems, but it has gotten really bad, where UnitedHealthcare would ask for pre-authorization for an emergency, and then a patient couldn't be treated. And it has really gotten to the point where physicians are very angry. Hospitals are very angry. But I don't think that we want anybody murdered. That's still not who we are. But I do think we need to explore how broken healthcare must be if physicians feel this way.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's kind of like my thought too. It's like this just illustrates how broken everything is. But it's like, well, what's that road to mending it? What's that road to fixing it?
That is the multi-million-dollar question.
Billion-dollar question, probably.
Probably a billion-dollar question, yes. Back to Brian Thompson. He was paid $10 million a year from UnitedHealthcare, and he was being investigated by the the DOJ, the Department of Justice, for securities fraud, for cashing in $15 million of stock options right before UnitedHealthcare was investigated for antitrust violations. So he's not a great person. I mean, that's in our view. I don't know him personally, so I couldn't tell you. Maybe he was a wonderful father or husband. I don't know those things, but I can tell you that we're not happy about how much money he took out of the system that could have gone to patients. So that's bad. So, but if you look at other countries, it's not necessarily better. So the question, of course, is how do you even fix healthcare? What a mess.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing is just weird to think that, again, this happened. And my first thought was, why was someone that is so affluent and possibly hated freely just walking down the street publicly anyway? Like, my whole thought was like, wow, I can't believe this hasn't happened before.
That's a little scary, though. You have to admit, why hasn't this happened before? I'm hoping that vigilante justice is not our go-to, really.
Yeah, I'm curious what they figure out the motive to be, like whether this has to do with someone was denied and this is justice in some sense.
It certainly sounded like it. The bullet casings had words defend, deny, and delay on it. So that certainly sounds like it has to do with UnitedHealthcare's denial of claims.
I've seen enough movies or shows to be like, that's exactly what they'd want you to believe if someone hired him and tried to.
Oh, you're saying his wife killed him? And
well, no, just like if somehow, like, you know, whether even like a competitor company hired someone to like I don't think it was a business move, but because of shows, anything's possible, right?
You're right. We love conspiracies. So sure, that's definitely possible. But I think it is very likely that because of all those denials that somebody was really that upset.
Yeah, you wonder, like, it almost seems like you have to be without conscience to lead a company and continue the direction that just maximizes profits for shareholders without regard to trying to make the system better for the actual people that are using it, you know?
And that's what I find so strange. I mean, if you look at other companies, first of all, if you're not dealing with life and death situations, it does feel like you could be more beholden to your stockholders. Like, I don't know, Elon Musk or Costco or, you know, these other companies that are trying to maximize profits, but they actually do care about who they're serving too. And their customers feel that way, that they're being cared about, or they wouldn't keep going. UnitedHealthcare does not feel like they care about their customers. And of course, I call them patients, but they call them customers.
Well, and that's the crazy thing, though. You're talking about like Costco. Like, what decisions could they make
That are life and death? None.
Right. Like, okay, so they raise the price. They change their, you know, now when you walk in, you have to scan your card so they know exactly how long you're in the building, possibly. And people might be like, oh, that's intrusive. Like these minor things. Amazon, okay, maybe minor things, maybe a little more far reaching because Amazon's involved in seemingly everything. But we're talking about healthcare where it's like someone's ability to get treatment because it's linked to financial costs that are so absorbent. People don't have $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 sitting around, which could be the reason why they can or can't treat a loved one.
I guess that is probably the biggest frustration that I am hearing, just from my own healthcare costs and my friends who are dealing with healthcare costs. We pay about $1,300 a month. We have a $6,000 deductible in network and a $20,000 deductible out of network, which means that I've actually never had anything paid from UnitedHealthcare ever. I have always had to pay out of pocket, which is a little frustrating to pay that much for health insurance. But I mean, it's low compared to some of my friends who are paying $50,000, $60,000 a year for health insurance with that kind of a deductible that they've never used. And then when they do need it, it's denied. So that is a hard pill to swallow and not reasonable for most of the public.
Okay, so you're like queen of ethics. You're not just a normal dentist, very ethically minded. You speak on ethics. Does it feel weird that this is almost getting like the comedy is getting introduced into comments like on Reddit about being denied. Like, does it seem wrong? Does it seem like an overreach, or does it seem like acceptable given the situation?
The problem is, as I said, there's not an ounce of sympathy in me, which is not like me. Like, I went to see Wicked, and when they're dancing on the floor and, Elphaba is embarrassed, I cried. So, I mean, I'm that kind of person. There's a lot of sympathy. There's a lot of empathy for people, and I have none, which is not like me. So that is an indication that there's definitely a problem. The dark humor does seem inappropriate, and I can see that. And yet I can also hear the frustration. And especially when you watch, I mean, when they're talking about a patient dying in front of their eyes and they can't treat them because it's $1 million and, they don't have an extra $1 million laying around, which UnitedHealthcare does. So that's hard. And so I hear that frustration and why these kind of jokes are being made. It's still dark and probably unethical. You're right.
I mean, I think if it helps people, I don't know, process it.
I don't think it's a process. I think that there is an outrage that has been ignored too long about how healthcare is working and how it continues to get worse. And in my little dental world, of course, no one's dying in my chair. Hopefully, nobody's dying in my chair. I don't have those kind of issues. But I do know that I went to work. I was working, 8 hours a day, and I work 10 hours a day now because of notes and insurance and denials. I mean, my workload has increased significantly because of that. And I also know that I have a lot of younger dentists who are $500,000 in debt just from school, and they're working so much because they get paid so little from insurance. And so there's a lot of frustration there on the other end, not just the customer end, but on the doctor end, where it's not just patients dying, it's the unbelievable load of work to get an insurance to pay for very little.
So I think one thing that is a little scary when it comes to implications of this that don't have to do with healthcare, just have to do with society. Earlier today we were just talking randomly because we love breaking apart, trends in society. I brought up Columbine, and I don't think, in hindsight, it's clear that was the very first time something like that happened. And now there's copycats all the time. They're not even called copycats. It's just there's a whole category called school shootings that didn't exist before Columbine. That wasn't a thing.
And so, no, we cannot allow that. We cannot allow that. So I'm sure there will be some security for CEOs at this point of healthcare. And I'm hoping that maybe there'll be a reevaluation of our healthcare system rather than vigilante justice, because that's really not going to solve anything. His death really isn't going to affect the industry in any way. It's just an opportunity for people to say how they really feel.
Well, I just hope that, I know the media, I don't know what their role is in this, but that's kind of even part of, again, the murderer didn't get killed. Like, we're in the school shooting situation. It's like, well, that person's story got told, and I don't want to say they became a hero, but it's like other people that were like, oh, I'm invisible, I could go nationwide, that became a thing. I don't know how the media is going to handle, everyone's talking about this right now, on social media or just mainstream news. So I'm not sure what the media's responsibility is to make this not become something that could be copycatted, and whether it's CEOs in general of like, hey, if you're outraged, do something about it, or whether it's limited to healthcare. I just hope that doesn't happen, because I think it's crazy.
I don't see that happening, because again, nothing is going to change because of his death. Absolutely nothing is going to be changed. Tomorrow there will be more denials from UnitedHealthcare regardless of his death.
What about Blue Cross Blue Shield?
I did see that Blue Cross Blue Shield was going to limit how long a patient could be under anesthesia during a surgery, and they wouldn't pay after a certain amount of time, which is ludicrous. I mean, completely ludicrous. And after this, there was a reversal of that. I still don't think that I don't think that the death of a CEO is going to change a company. I just don't. And I am willing to bet that this will be reversed again, and they will put those limits on. So no, vigilante justice is not going to change it. But I do think it is a national call that we need to look at our health service, how we work in this country. And I do feel like it's important to say that this universal healthcare that people keep talking about, where we're just going to have the government take over, it does work in other countries, but they are not paying $500,000 for their education. So if you intend to continue to educate doctors with that kind of debt and then not pay them, that's going to be a serious issue. So it's going to have to be, you can't just fix one piece without looking at the entirety of it. So if there's any opportunity to look at healthcare and change it, you can't just change one thing.
Thank you for listening to the Authentic Dentist Podcast. To join Allison and Shawn on this journey, hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode. Here's to your success. Express yourself fully. Live authentic.